Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure being here for this new MED dialogue. We are from this virtual theater, but unfortunately, being virtual...
Monica, you are mute.
I'm mute. I'm so sorry, but what can I do? I don't have any chance to open my microphone. So, mi dicono che sono muta. Chiedo alla regia di aprire il mio microfono. There's a technical issue here. Just give us a few seconds to verify what's going on. What is it happening? Let's try to talk again. Is it working now? I'm in a virtual theater, but can you hear me now? Okay, now it's good. You see, sometimes technology, we are in this incredible place, and basically I miss you all out there very much because it's an empty place, and you should be here with us this afternoon for this new MED dialogue talk. We will be discussing the region, the Mediterranean Sea, the way in which we can rethink security. Mare Omnium is the title, a shared approach to Mediterranean security. I will be sharing this afternoon, this first part of the afternoon, with Ian Lesser that you see from far. Ian, good afternoon. He's the Vice President of the German Marshall Fund, a very good friend of MED. We tend to be on the same stage normally, Ian, but now this afternoon you look somewhere else with many books on the background. And we will try to make a point about what's going on in the region, which is the new way to security, how a global and regional approach could change what's going on and the situation on the ground. But let me first give the floor to Marina Sereni, who's the Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation in Italy, who's been traveling quite extensively in the region, and I'm really happy to give her the floor.
Thank you very much, Monica. Dear colleagues and guests, as Minister Di Maio pointed out in his opening speech, today we are confronted with an extremely fragile situation in the enlarged Mediterranean, with the economy increasingly suffering and the social order under pressure as a result of the interaction between long-standing crises, transnational threats, and geopolitical and ideological competition among global and regional players. These multifaceted crises and challenges to our common security are further exacerbated by the spread of COVID-19, which is accelerating social fragmentation in the region and adding its burden to all existing sources of instability. Against this backdrop, it is crucial to develop a common and shared strategy to Mediterranean security. This strategy should be twofold. First, we must clearly identify and prioritize the most pressing threats and challenges to be addressed. In doing that, it is important to move beyond the traditional security approach and develop a new security paradigm that focuses also on the structural drivers and enablers of instability. Second, and more important, we need to devise together credible and viable solutions to the challenges previously identified and advance a positive agenda aimed at switching from competitive to cooperative dynamics. As for Italy, we remain convinced that one of our common priorities should be to address new and long-standing crises that affect the region by promoting dialogue and inclusive political solutions, under the aegis of the UN. The Libyan crisis summarizes both main topics of the panel that I have the honor to introduce. Building peace in Libya is, in fact, a major factor to stabilize the whole Euro-Mediterranean region, and a shared approach to security is essential to support the Libyans' efforts towards peace and prosperity. After a conflict that generated dire humanitarian consequences and put the country at risk, the ceasefire agreement is a positive step to preserve the unity and integrity of Libya, stabilize security conditions for resuming oil production and exports, and rebuild trust among Libyans. It has also opened a window of opportunity to achieve significant progress in the political dimension. The shared approach that is guiding the Libyans among the promising, albeit still challenging, way to normalization has to be matched with a shared approach of the international community and the Mediterranean countries. We should contribute to the effective implementation of the ceasefire, starting with the cessation of any external interference. We should protect the negotiation space from any attempt to spoil the UN-led initiative. We should fully support UNSMIL and the Berlin process, as Italy proudly does. Such a shared approach to security is the only option to guarantee long-term stability for Libya. The same applies to the Syrian crisis, a humanitarian tragedy that has been unfolding before our eyes for almost 10 years. Its consequences and repercussions on regional security are well known and yet no less striking. Millions of refugees and IDPs flowing to neighboring countries and to Europe. Direct and indirect military confrontation between regional and global powers. The spread of radicalization and terrorism. By now, it is clear to all, I believe, that there can be no military solution and that only a political process supported by the international community and in line with the Security Council Resolution 2254 can bring peace and sustainable stability to the country. In this regard, we welcome recent progress on the work of the Constitutional Committee. Equally important to address the deep roots of instability and ensure lasting peace to the region is that we all support the relaunch of the Middle East peace process with a view to achieve a just and viable two-state solutions directly negotiated between Israelis and Palestinians and in line with the international law. The Abraham Accords show that it is not impossible to work together and overcome all rivalries and hostilities, thus contributing to make our region more stable and secure. We also look with particular attention at recent developments in Lebanon, which is currently facing an unprecedented political and economic crisis in the aftermath of the August 4th explosion. The international community, starting from Mediterranean countries, must continue to stand beside the Lebanese people and provide all the necessary support, while calling on Lebanese authorities to shoulder their responsibilities and adopt long overdue structural reforms. In the Eastern Mediterranean, the unilateral actions and provocations that we registered over the last few weeks did not mark steps in the right direction, and we have been firm in condemning them at both bilateral and European level. We are persuaded that such tensions cannot be solved unless their root causes are properly addressed through good faith dialogue and sincere collaboration. We all have a lot to lose should we resign to a further deterioration of our relations instead of promoting a positive agenda. Jointly addressing the most relevant crises that affect the Mediterranean once they arise, however, is not sufficient. We believe that the objective to structurally decrease tensions and build a more secure and stable region can be achieved only if we succeed in fostering regional cooperation and seek greater integration, including by promoting the joint management of Mediterranean common goods. Take energy, for instance. Only a cooperative long-term approach will allow for the full exploitation of the energy potential of the Mediterranean, with shared benefits in terms of security, stability, and prosperity. On the contrary, an antagonistic approach can only produce a de facto waste of vast resources, a lose-lose scenario that fosters competition without bringing advantages to any of the parties involved. The EastMed Gas Forum provides an excellent example of an energy forum which could also be used as a leverage to enhance dialogue and advance common interests, even on sensitive political issues, thus strengthening the overall security architecture of the Mediterranean. Cooperation among all countries in the region is key also to address transnational threats such as illicit trafficking, smuggling, and terrorism. Terrorist groups, in particular, have not stood idle during the pandemic, using the rhetoric on the global crisis to spread their ideologies and to plan attacks. Therefore, Italy looks forward to hosting the global coalition to defeat ISIS in Naples when conditions permit. The strong belief in the added value of regional cooperation inspired our country to establish in October 2017, during our mandate of the UN Security Council, the Mediterranean Women Mediators Network, which brings together more than 50 women, the mediators from 24 countries of the region, including Libya, Lebanon, and Palestine. The network intends to support and enable women mediators to play a meaningful and constructive role in promoting sustainable and inclusive peace and reconciliation. To sum up, I am convinced that developing a shared approach to Mediterranean security requires both increasing dialogue and synergies to address existing crises in the framework of negotiated political processes and fostering cooperation in key areas so as to move beyond competition. I am not naive, and I know perfectly that it is not an easy task at all, especially in the context of growing polarization that we witness today in the Mediterranean. But this is precisely the reason why it is worth trying. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Minister Sereni. Thanks for giving us the framework in which we could situate our discussion here, a shared approach. We will create different focuses this afternoon to go in depth in any situation. So we will start talking about Libya. In a few minutes, we will connect to Mohamed Taher Siala, who's the foreign minister of Libya. But let me first introduce the issue with Stephanie Williams. Stephanie is the acting special representative of the Secretary General for Libya. So I will go and talk to Stephanie Williams, and I will ask our Regia here to follow me, because I can see her. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Stephanie. Thanks for being with us. We all hope next year it will be in person. But let's start talking about the Mediterranean and in particular about Libya. So your action there. UN is having there an approach which is obviously a multilateral approach. Is she listening to me? I can see her right now.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So basically, I was just speaking about the fact that UN obviously has a multilateral approach to peace. And in Libya, this looks even more important. But When it comes to the unilateral actions of the different foreign actors, your activity all of a sudden becomes very difficult and very complicated. Stephanie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and I want to also send my regards to Vice Minister Sereni and to His Excellency Foreign Minister Siala, and greetings to the audience and to my UN colleagues who are also on this call. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank Minister Siala and the Government of National Accord for their facilitation of UN activities in Libya. So I'm going to be very brief. And say, I think what is pretty clear, which is foreign interference has negatively impacted the multilateral approach to resolving the Libyan crisis under the auspices of the UN mediation. However, this is in a context of a larger trend that has seen the Security Council split on many peace and security issues, which is why last year in 2019, under the former SRSG, Hassan Salama, we designed and built the Berlin process, which brings together all of the main regional and international actors, and which is a critical forum to manage the international proxy influence. And so while it's true that neither
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're talking to Stephanie Williams, but okay, here you are, because we couldn't see you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but all of a sudden we couldn't see you, and we want to see you here.
Oh, there was okay.
So okay, your camera was off. Please.
Look. Oh, okay. Sorry. Technology.
It's okay.
So look,
it's okay.
So look, the Berlin process, while look, there were a number of Security Council resolutions that weren't honored. The Security Council was, split and divided. We designed the Berlin process to bring together, the international and regional actors who had sort of the most influence on the ground. That, has been a productive environment in order to implicate, these particularly those with proxy influence on the ground. And so, indeed, what we have seen since the conference that was held in January of this year, and particularly in the last few months, is progression, really, on the three tracks that the Libyan led and owned tracks that are part and parcel of the Berlin process: economic, military, and political. I'll start with the military because, the ceasefire agreement that was signed on October 23rd in Geneva was referenced, and indeed that was quite an extraordinary coming together of the military officers from both sides of the conflict. They agreed to, and this truly was a Libyan-led process, because there was a period of time in the talks in Geneva when the UN wasn't in the room. So, and that's actually okay, because this is Libyans talking to Libyans and charting their own future and reasserting their sovereignty, and it really stems from this. This feeling that the country was slipping away, was being lost, and so they came together with this ambitious ceasefire agreement that, among other things, called for mercenaries and foreign forces to depart within a certain period of time. Now, it was also accompanied by some very important confidence building measures, like the resumption of all flights internally in the country, which is happening, and the resumption of oil production, which is now basically back to record levels following the lifting of force majeure. So they also, agreed that they wanted to meet again in Libya, and they did that very quickly. And we accompanied them first in Ghadames, and now most recently in Sirte. And then we had a follow-on meeting with the National Oil Corporation and the Petroleum Facilities Guards to stand up really a new petroleum protection force. All of this is good, but the situation is very fragile because because there is continuing foreign interference. There are blatant breaches of the UN arms embargo. There are, foreign forces still on the ground. There are daily multiple flights, military cargo flights carrying, they're not carrying Girl Scout cookies. They're carrying, prohibited items under the arms embargo to both sides of the conflict. And as a result, the military forces have not been able yet to withdraw from the area that they designated that needs to be free from military forces and free from foreign mercenaries. So there's a lot of work to do, and it's really incumbent upon the international community, including all of the members of the Berlin Group and the Security Council, to support the Libyans in their call and their desire for this ceasefire agreement to be respected.
Thank you.
On the economic side, oil production was resumed, and that's good. But we now have tension, and it's to be expected, over the management of the oil revenues. There's a confrontation between the National Oil Corporation and the central bank. We support the National Oil Corporation's decision to retain the oil revenues in a frozen account in the Libyan Foreign Bank, and to be managed in an apolitical manner until there's a political settlement, and unification of the sovereign financial and economic institutions of the country, which is what most Libyans want. So in addition, the central bank board needs to meet to tackle the foreign exchange rate. On the political front, really quickly, there was a lot of progress that was made in the first round of the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum talks in Tunis. We got 70% of the way, and we charted with the Libyans a roadmap which set a date for elections. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to realize those national elections, including electoral legislation and a constitutional basis, and of course, security on the ground. Now, what didn't happen was the formation of the unified executive. And again, that's what most Libyans want. They want a unified executive because they want the provision of services at the municipal level, which frankly isn't happening because there's misgovernance on both sides, and the unified institutions can be an engine to help pave the way towards national elections and the renewal of the democratic legitimacy of Libyan institutions. We are facing, not unsurprisingly, because this has been the pattern over the last years, there is a powerful, status quo party that doesn't want change. These people are materially benefiting from the status quo. They have access to, wealth, power, privileged the official exchange rate, where many of their compatriots don't have access to the official exchange rate. This has cost the country dearly. We saw demonstrations over the summer. There's critical infrastructure like the electricity infrastructure, which has not been tended. So the international community here also needs to step up. There needs to be a common approach to signal to spoilers, obstructionists, and the status quo that this is not sustainable. That the perils, the fragility of the situation is such that everybody needs to do their part. They need to rise to the level of national responsibility that frankly we saw with the military officers who came together in the 5+5. So we continue the discussions with the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum. It's a very good group. They need to get this. They need the support from the street. I think there is great support. We have a good track with women, and you referenced your own dialogue, and that's been very helpful. And we have a good track with the youth and municipalities, and we're standing up a tribal track as we speak. So, a lot is feeding into the dialogue, but more pressure is needed, and particularly from external actors to make it clear that there is a consequence for inaction. But overall, I remain optimistic about the trajectory in Libya, despite some of the signals on the ground, because now there is what I call a constituency for change inside the country. And these people are lifting their voices and coming together and wanting to reconcile. And this I have not seen, over the past 3 years that I've been covering the Libya file. So with that, I will end, and thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, and I think it's so important, the new perspective you're giving us here, giving us the chance to understand that something is going on there, something is changing on the ground because of what Libyans want. So we thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. It has been really important to put into our perspective, your experience there. Thank you so very much to the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Libya, Stephanie Williams. Thank you. And let's move and give the floor now to His Excellency Mohammed Taher Siala, who's the Foreign Minister of Libya. And we are honored to talk to you, sir, because this afternoon we would like to ask you to help us understanding a little more what's going on there. We just heard good signs from your country, but let us understand a little better if peace is the priority there, what's needed to get to peace, what is still needed there?
Thank you, Madam Vice Minister Marina Sereni. So what is missing for peace? It was clear right from the beginning that the Libyan crisis is first and foremost a crisis due to external interference. Such interference was not limited to political interference, but also a military interference through mercenaries, air force, and foreign fighters. The crisis was therefore complicated, and the stop to oil exports worsened the crisis further, with an impact on all the other services in the country. The national agreement government sees that political stability is a priority, and in fact President Sarraj has stated several times that there needed to be a ceasefire. He went to Moscow through a Russian-Turkish initiative, and he signed the peace truce, but the other party did not. And then he also went to Berlin. He accepted all of the proposals that were made by the Berlin summit, and he took part also in the activities by appointing representatives in the 5+5 committee that is now working in a satisfactory manner. As Madam Williams said, and I thank her for her diagnosis, well, there is a political path, an economic path, and a military path. The military path is progressing, but we ask ourselves, what is going to happen after the ceasefire? Will the situation go on being as it is in this fragile situation in Sirte, in Jufra, with the interference from foreign parties, thus violating the red lines in the Libyan territory? Or will there be an exit of all foreign fighters and mercenaries from the country, therefore leaving the Libyan dialogue to take care of the Libyan situation on its own? Well, there has been a meeting in Tunisia, and there was some success. Meetings were held in Egypt, and some progress has been made. Now, this dialogue, these different dialogues are ongoing, and they are taking place in very special conditions and circumstances. In the midst of the COVID pandemic, for instance, that has complicated things even further in Libya. It has drained away public resources. For this reason, the situation has become increasingly complicated and intricate. I think I have answered your question. So my country is experiencing right now very difficult circumstances that are due mainly to foreign interference in the Libyan situation, not only political interference, but also a military interference, which requires cooperation in order to keep the dialogue going, thanks to the initiative of the United Nations. We need to charter a roadmap to find a solution to the crisis, and I hope that Madam Stephanie Williams will succeed in being successful, and that she may accompany our discussions through to peace and security. As Madam Stephanie Williams said, well, yes, the oil is being extracted 1 million barrels a day, whereas during the war it had to drop to 150,000 barrels a day. So the money from the oil is deposited in an offshore Libyan bank, and the money will not be touched for services for the Libyans. The money is frozen, and we hope that this block can be lifted so that the money can be spent in this last month of the 2020 and start providing services for 2021 with the help of God. And I hope I've answered your question.
Absolutely. Definitely so, Minister. And thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. But briefly, before leaving you, let me just understand, how confident are you in the process that is ahead of you going towards the elections? You think it will be a process that will change what's going on in the country or not?
ذكرى استقلال ليبيا هو قرار جيد ولكن تتطلب هذه الانتخابات.
This was an important step forward, but it requires an important atmosphere. That is, we need to make ready for this date. In order for the process to be successful, we need to comply with certain conditions. We must, with regard to the Electoral Commission, we need for there to be international monitoring. And the government of nationally agreed government will have to provide the Libyans with services so as to ensure that they may go and vote, that they may participate in the elections. The Libyan population must seek to come to an agreement with regard to parliament, for instance. A unified parliament is required, and it should be able to meet for the first time in 2 years, and therefore lay constitutional foundations for the parliamentary and presidential elections, and therefore come up with a law or a referendum on the project. And the constitution, as was agreed by a committee that sees the participation of 60 personalities that represent all the parties in play. And so we need to convince the political partners and stakeholders that when these results when the election results are announced, they will be accepted by everyone.
Definitely.
So as to reach a situation of stability that we all hope for. And we see what is happening in the United States, for instance, after their elections. that were not accepted by the acting president, who says that they were not fair. So we want elections to be monitored by the international community, and then the politicians will have to accept the results of the elections.
So you say someone from outside able to...
And Libya will reach political stability that we would like with the help of God.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. So it's clear, you want a clear result so that all Libyans can consider that a clear and result in which they can trust. Thank you so much, Minister. We had this focus on Libya. Now let's move to another area of crisis in which stability is fundamental. So let me just give the floor to Ian Lesser. Ian, the floor is yours.
Monica, thank you very much indeed. And it's good to be back at the Mediterranean Dialogues, hopefully next year in person, but hello from Brussels. As you say, the Mediterranean basin has no shortage of crises and many tests for actors both in the region and externally. And we're going to move now to talk about another one, which is near the top of the agenda, perhaps should be higher up the agenda, but we'll talk about that. And that's Syria. Not just Syria, but also how it's affecting security elsewhere in the Levant, including Lebanon. And we have three wonderful people with us, one virtually, not physically able to be in the conversation, but two are. And let me just say who we are going to have, so we have a little bit of a roadmap to our conversation. First, we're going to have a message from Geir Pedersen, who's the UN Special Envoy for Syria. And then after that, we're going to go into a conversation in turn with Professor Marwa Daoudy, who is an associate professor at Georgetown University and author of a recent book on the origins of the Syrian conflict. And secondly, we're really delighted to have with us Major General Stefano Del Col, who is, has been since 2018, the head of mission and force commander for UNIFIL, for UN Interim Force in Lebanon. He'll be able to talk to us a bit about the situation on the ground there as he sees it, but also the interaction between that and the situation in Syria more broadly. So without further ado, let's listen to Geir Pedersen.
Good morning. I'm sorry for not being able to connect with you live today and that we are not together in Rome. As you may know, we just started with the 4th session of the Syrian Constitutional Committee today. Let me thank my good friend Paolo Magri and his team, and in particular as well, Foreign Minister Di Maio, and of course his Syria envoy, Paolo Dionisi, for their virtual hospitality and for their support to the UN's effort in Syria. It's highly appreciated. As 2020 draws to a close, the situation of Syria is deeply concerning on almost every level. The political process is moving far too slowly. The suffering of the Syrians inside is growing as the economy collapses, and the suffering of the refugees outside continues too. The only silver lining is that there has been a relative calm since March of this year, despite many violations, and there is a nascent Syrian political process in the form of the Constitutional Committee, which, as I told you, is meeting right now in Geneva, and will meet again in January, COVID permitting. But the dangers of renewed conflict are ever present. And meanwhile, the Constitutional Committee's work has not yet built the kind of trust or seen the kind of substantive progress needed on its mandate to prepare and draft for popular approval a constitutional reform. I have appealed to the Syrian parties to seize the opportunity of these two meetings to find some meaningful common ground and begin to chart a path forward on the constitutional track. I'm also appealing to all international players to encourage the parties to move forward and to join me in reflecting on where we really stand on implementing Resolution 2254. With the conflict highly internationalized, with 5 foreign armies active in Syria, we cannot pretend that the solutions are only in the hands of the Syrians alone, or that the UN can do it alone. We need a constructive international diplomacy on Syria, and that is why I continually seek to facilitate this. In that spirit, in the past month or so, I've been in Syria, Turkey, Egypt, Russia, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, and I have been holding remote contacts with many other stakeholders too. And I'm looking forward to engaging a new US administration when it is in place as well. It is clear that no one actor or group of actors can impose their will on Syria or settle the conflict alone, and thus they must work together. And despite the differences, the truth is that there are common interests among key international players in stability, in containing terrorism, on refugees, on preventing further conflict. We surely must be able to collectively build on these. I particularly believe we need to encourage Russia and the new US administration to re-engage and find common ground, step by step, concretely, on the way forward. Turkey and Iran are crucial players too, and must be at the table. The Europeans and the Arab world also have vital interest and contributions to make, and we need China. As I continue to urge international players to work in support of a Syrian-led and owned process, I will continue to involve and consult Syrian women. Nearly 30% of the Constitutional Committee are women, and I am in regular contacts with the Women's Advisory Board to hear their insights on all aspects of the political process, including gender concerns. And I stress the importance of engaging a broad cross-section of Syrian civil society through the Civil Society Support Room. The views and aspirations of Syrians from all walks of life must be taken into due consideration for any political solution to gain long-term support and stand the test of time. Dear friends, this is a time of huge global and regional challenges. We must ensure that addressing the crisis in Syria is high among our shared priorities. Syria is a country with a great and proud history, and it is enduring the most profound tragedy. If we cannot begin to unlock progress step by step in a reciprocal and mutually reinforcing manner along the path of 2254, the dangers to Syria's civilians, to Syria as a state, and to the region will only grow. This cannot be acceptable to any of us. That's why I count on the support of all key actors for maintaining calm nationwide, supporting confidence building, and moving the political process forward. I wish you every success in Rome. Thank you.
Our thanks to the Special Envoy for being with us virtually. It was good to have his introduction on many levels. He spoke a great deal about the geopolitics of the situation, but also the importance of a multilateral approach. Clearly, there are going to be key tests coming up, and he alluded to this quite directly, actually, for the United States with a new administration, but also for the European Union, and a test for the international community more broadly, almost 10 years after the start of the conflict. But he also went on to talk about the internal dynamics in Syria and the social tragedies that's been unfolding for years within Syrian society, including civil society. And that's, in a way, a perfect lead into our next conversation, because we're very fortunate to have, again, Professor Daoudy, Marwa, if I may, with us today to talk a little bit about that dimension. There is something that was something of the quality of a revolution to this in Syrian society. What's happened to that revolution over time, and what are the prospects for stability in Syrian society, for reform in Syria?
First, allow me to thank Professor Magri for inviting me today. I'm very pleased to join the Mediterranean Dialogues for the first time, and Mr. Lesser for moderating this very interesting conversation. I have to say today, the Syrians are mourning over one of the most tragic episodes of their rich history. The society, the country is deeply polarized, deeply wounded. And I mean, we know the numbers, and the numbers are appalling, but it's good to remind also ourselves of what the 10 years of conflict have produced. Syria's war has killed between 600,000 to 1 million people. There are 500,000 detainees today and disappeared, and 12 million persons, or 2/3 of the population, forced out of their homes. The GDP loss is estimated at 54% decrease compared to 2010 levels. Today, we know that there was a Syrian revolution. The uprising started peacefully. They were very brutally crushed. And the idea of a revolution was brutally crushed as the conflict became internationalized. Mr. Gate Peterson referred to the 5 armies which are occupying now the country. We know how many regional and international actors have hijacked the revolution, foreign fighters also as well. And there's been a loss of the agency of Syrians here. At the same time, I would say there's an ethos of the revolution, to answer your question, Mr. Lesser. When I do interviews and I meet with young refugees and less young, activists as well, the spirit of revolution is still mobilizing I would say their mobilization. It's mobilizing their ideals for the future of Syria. It has been brutally crushed. We know there's a very brutal conflict, which is still happening now in the northwestern part of Syria. But they're being driven by that ideal. And I would say there's a before and after 2011, although the geopolitics of it show that it's been hijacked and destroyed. But in the minds of people, and I'm talking about civil society, I'm talking about writers, I'm talking about refugees, the ideal is still there. And hopefully it will be driving future plans for the country as well, to take into account this ideal for social justice, but also for change and reform.
Professor Daoudy, maybe I could just follow up on that by asking you to talk a little bit more about the whole question of reconstruction in Syria. I mean, obviously this can have different meanings. There's the physical reconstruction and who will pay for that and how it could be done. That in some ways is difficult enough, but might be the simpler of the challenges when you consider also the challenge of social and political reconstruction in the country. You started to talk about that, but perhaps you could say a little bit more about how these two things could go together and how long it would take. Indeed, is it possible?
So we hear accounts that we are in a post-conflict reconstruction phase. I do believe we are not at that stage yet. We are still in a conflict stage. We know that parts of the country, the northwest, the Idlib province is being, as we speak, heavily bombarded. We know that children continue to die. We know that detainees are still imprisoned. So the post-conflict reconstruction has to be prepared clearly by the international community, by the country itself. And the problem that I foresee now at this stage, because we have these parallel realities happening at the same time, while we're talking about peace talks, we're talking about international involvement, we're talking about reconstruction at the time when the country is still being destroyed, and that there's no accountability of who is doing what, and the perpetrators of these war crimes that have to be tackled at some point. So my concern is, when we think about reconstruction, is rather than building effective, intrinsic human resilience, the current post-war reconstruction is paving the way for what I would see as more regime resilience and war profits for external powers based on the very structural inequalities that accentuate all of the human insecurity that we're witnessing since 10 years, which is economically, politically, and environmentally based. So if we are to tackle reconstruction, we have to look into the structural drivers of human insecurity and what is causing, in fact, the hazard and the damage to the population, again, population who is deeply, deeply wounded and shattered, and the social fabric of the country as well. And what we see now is networks of profits which are emerging, very lucrative networks, decrease in the human security of the population. We know that half of the population is food insecure. We have bread lines forming in Damascus. We see these very new developments of people being to the point of famine, according to, for example, famous dissident Yassin Haj Saleh, who says we are facing an imminent threat of famine. And at the same time, physical reconstruction, but also it has to be somehow also psychological reconciliation and reconstruction for the country to come together again. And I don't foresee that happening at the current stage.
Professor Daoudy, thank you for those comments. And in a way, they also lead into our next discussion. And we're pleased to have with us for this next discussion, as I had mentioned, General Stefano Del Col, who heads UNIFIL in Lebanon. There is a regional dimension to this. It's not the situation in Syria obviously has implications for what is going on in Lebanon, but at the same time, the experience in Lebanon could have implications for how the situation in Syria evolves and indeed how the international community deals with it. And so, General, maybe if I could turn to you to ask you to reflect just a little bit on your experience there, some of your priorities on the ground, how you cooperate with other stakeholders and peacekeepers. And then we'll go into a little bit, because I know our time is short, some of the implications in Syria. But General, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. It's a very pleasure to be part of this panel and show my thoughts on building peace in the Mediterranean. I'm going to talk about, we speak about the Lebanese and the Israeli context. The region where I'm living, the Middle East, has a head of UNIFIL particularly affected by the growing fracture among the global and regional actors. So in the, above all, I have to thank who has organized the panel and to say hello to the Vice Minister of the Italian Foreign Affairs. So UNIFIL as a peacekeeping mission is one of the largest on the world. We first and foremost focus on ensuring that our air operation from the Litani River to the Blue Line remains stable and that the tension is diffused before the escalation. We are around 10,000 blue helmets, and according with the resolution 1701 that was approved in 2006 after the war, with a mix of land and maritime forces, which actually Italy is the second largest contributor. And with the support of around 1,000 civilians, is a clear challenge to the resumption of the conflict. And I hear often from my Lebanese interlocutor and the other stakeholders how the mission is a factor of stability for the whole country. And this is not just a result of a military presence, but rather a combination of very unique initiatives that we have taken with the parties to complement our mandate task. In my experience, some of the most essential tools that I have at my disposal are the efficient, effective, for example, liaison and coordination arrangements that are put in place to enable both parties to diffuse tension and prevent escalation. We assist the Lebanese armed forces and the Israeli Defense Forces to find mutually agreeable solution arrangement and explore confidence building measures to reduce the potential for tension of injury to occur. So we support the force of government of Lebanon in extending its authority in the south and to increase the capacity of the Lebanese armed forces in southern Lebanon and at sea. In this context, in this environment, the continued international support of the Lebanese armed forces as the sole provider of security is a crucial factor in maintenance of peace and security in that area. When a state is the provider of governance and security for its citizens, the space for non-state structure is significantly reduced. We are in facilitating this. UNIFIL is creating the condition to enable a political process to have a permanent ceasefire. In the situation where the two countries are not willing to engage directly in the political track, we provide and prolong situation stability. Also, obviously, benefit raise the stakes and create the new dynamic that render the cost of war for greater for each side. Indeed, the dividends of stability transcend the political divides, ideological and religion, benefiting equally the people of southern Lebanon and northern Israel. Recently, we have witnessed a launch of talks between Israel and Lebanon to delineate the maritime border, which I feel is an encouraging development. Regarding the ground line, called technically blue line, is the line of withdrawal of the Israeli forces from Lebanon in 2000. And in the absence of an agreed international border between the two countries, which is still technically at war with one another, we need to mark the blue line as an important deconfliction measure. I'm encouraged, I'd like to share with you that I'm encouraged now by the agreement of both parties to my recent proposal to resume the visible mark in the blue line, which had been suspended a few years ago. But we have to think on the future. I recently asked to take further steps to settle a disputed area along the blue line that will provide much needed confidence in building peace between the two countries. It's not going to be easy, but as my colleague and friend in this panel will know, that sometimes even to have the party agree to sit at the table, or as happened right now under the tent, is an achievement. It's not yet the time to talk of normalization, but I wish on the future. I would like to point out that despite the threat of many countries for multilateralism, the demand of UN members to contribute to a unified peacekeeping mission remains as high as ever. We have two countries that, for instance, that have joined us, Hungary and Poland, in the last year, and I'm very grateful to all of the 45 two contributing countries for their continued support to UNIFIL. And UN has contributed to a peaceful solution conflict, to mediation and preventing action, maintaining, consolidating international peace and security in many regions and countries in the world. This year, I like to stress that during the first ever virtual United Nations General Assembly, the world leaders have stressed the need to collective action to tackle a common threat. UN remains at the very center of multilateralism and of the vision that responds to the hopes and aspirations of all people. A more peaceful and prosperous world that leaves no one behind, as someone told me before me. Over to you.
General, thank you very much. Again, I'm conscious of our time, but I did want to move just to a second sort of theme with you. And that is, the linkages between the situation as you're experiencing it in Lebanon, country experiencing, for example, having over 1 million refugees on Lebanese territory, but many other connections, including Syrian security connections more directly, the links to Syria, how the situation in Lebanon affects the conditions in Syria, but also vice versa. And if you could talk a little bit about that, that would be a super way to round out our conversation.
Well, I want to thank you for that. I became head of mission and force commander of UNIFIL in August of 2018, and since that I had no chance to get bored. 2018 was the year of the underground tunnels crossing the blue line with a very complicated discussion. We have the Israeli construction of wall in very sensitive area in 2019. We suffered one of the most serious incidents since the 2006 war, when the 1st September missile and artillery shell were fired across the blue line. Later in 2019, at the end of 2019 and 2020, being yet another period marked by turmoil, raising tension, increased rhetoric, and around all the Middle East. Regarding Lebanon, many of you will be aware of the ongoing political paralysis and socioeconomic crisis, which has only been aggravated by the COVID-19 pandemic and the massive explosion in the port of Beirut on the last 4th of August. I think I have also to take the opportunity to thank all of the TTC, two contributing countries that considering what was approved on the latest resolution to 2539 that allow us to work outside the air operation for the first time in the history that we have been deployed in the Beirut port to help the Lebanese armed forces. But anyway, the challenge faced by the country cannot be tackled by Lebanon alone. and multilateral cooperation in support of Lebanon is more important than ever. The UN Secretary General called for an immediate universal ceasefire in March this year, which for my part I have a stand in Lebanon and Israel. But unfortunately, we continue to see a heightened rhetoric for the parties and incident along the blue line. Well, we work in an extremely volatile environment where even a small incident can quickly spiral out of the control and escalate in a full-scale armed conflict. Then the situation continues to exist in which the parties are formally committed to only a very, very, very fragile agreement of cessation of hostility. The long deployment of UNIFIL and the relative absence of full-scale hostilities over the last 14 years are not lead to complacency. We face situations every day along the blue line that could lead a rapid and deadly escalation. But let me move on regarding the Syria. Lebanon can easily be drawn into regional turmoil amidst the multiple destabilizing factors in the region and the absence of progress of the political track. We are already aware of the tremendous importance of the geopolitical position relevance of Lebanon and for Lebanon, development regarding 4 major regional actors are to be considered: the Arab Gulf, Iran, Turkey, and Syria. The Syrian conflict, for example, has resulted in a conflation of a conflict zone between Israel, Lebanon, and Syria, so that a strike in Syria can be connected to a retaliation across the blue line. This widened theater conflict between Israel and Hezbollah has rendered the blue line vulnerable to regional developments. And to maintain the individual logic of deterrence, the parties react to each other, action that is seen as a defensive move by one party is interpreted as a provocation by the other one. So the political crisis in the region, in my opinion, of course, has a huge impact on the humanitarian situation. Lebanon is hosting some of the highest number of Syrian refugees per capita, with an estimate of 1.5 million, with an economic crisis in Lebanon and the life here becoming tough. There is a recent trend of the Syrian refugee taking the dangerous journey by the sea, trying to cross over to Cyprus. In August, the UNIFIL Maritime Task Force rescued such a refugees boat. So UNIFIL mission will be accomplished when Lebanon assert its full sovereignty of its entire territory, especially in the south, and Israel and Lebanon fully respect each other's territorial integrity. Therefore, our goal, the UNIFIL goal, remains a permanent ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel. And the international community over the years has invested billions of dollars and great political capital to keep UNIFIL in place. And while this mission contribute to stabilization, constantly managing a potential situation, a disaster situation, and create conditions conducive to more for the cessation of hostility, to a permanent ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel. Ultimately, and I stop, building a lasting peace depends on the political will of the party themselves, and willingness that remains elusive. Thank you.
General, thank you very much for that. I apologize. Inevitably, we have an enormous amount to talk about and very little time to do it, but I have to thank you very much, Professor Daoudy and General Del Col, for being with us, but also for sharing these thoughts in a very rich, brief, but very rich discussion, which also leads us naturally into the next one, which is to look out a little more broadly and think about the challenges of stability and approaches to stability in the region as a whole, the Mediterranean region as a whole. And I'll let our next moderators actually talk to you about that, the structure of that conversation. But for the moment, I'm going to turn this over to Ricardo Chartreux from RAI to introduce the next session. And again, my thanks for the opportunity to be with you.
Thank you, Ian. Something physical is happening in Rome because I'm leaving the stage to Ricardo, and so, but distance. Okay, thank you very much.
My friend
bye
Monica.
bye.
Nice to see you, Monica.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, we are here in this virtual form, and I think I should say goodbye to all the panelists from the first session of this discussion about rethinking rethinking security in the Mediterranean. So, and then introduce the second part of the debate.
Dear guests, I would like to warmly thank Italy for the invitation to the 6th edition of the Rome MED Dialogues for this timely exchange about the challenges to the stability in the Mediterranean region. While I can't be there in person, I'm pleased to address you virtually. Last week, we celebrated the 25th anniversary of the Barcelona process that launched the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership with the objective of creating a common area of prosperity, stability and security based on democracy and good governance. This objective is part and parcel of the European Neighbourhood Policy, as well as of the bilateral and regional cooperation we have in place with the partner countries around the Mediterranean basin. They cover very diverse areas that include economic development, good governance, climate change, energy, migration and security. This year, the COVID-19 pandemic brought to the forefront the interdependence of our health, political, economic and migratory policies and worsened challenges already faced by the Mediterranean region. Thanks to our regular dialogue and close cooperation, the EU was able to respond quickly to the urgent health-related needs in the Maghreb and the Mashrek, also supporting the longer-term socio-economic and financial recovery of these countries. Over 2.3 billion euros have been mobilized for the region up to now. With the pandemic also came the necessity to start a new chapter of our cooperation, focusing on how recovery could strengthen the resilience of our partners. Our meeting last week in Barcelona with partner countries from the southern neighborhood was the occasion to kick off our joint reflection for a more strategic and ambitious partnership. This process will feed into the EU policy instrument on a renewed partnership with the southern neighborhood due in the first quarter of 2021. Strengthening economic governance, the investment and business environment, building a more relevant trade policy, supporting access to finance and innovation, we need to think creatively of the lessons we have learned over the past years and support actions that will have real impact on the ground. Based on our discussions with the partner countries, we are also planning to propose flagship projects of major economic scale that will help countries kickstart their recovery plans. This common approach will directly elevate our cooperation by including measures to foster the development of an economy that works for people, that attracts quality investments and creates more inclusive economies. Support to youth will continue to be at the heart of our action through better education, skills and jobs, allowing young people to build a future for their country and in their country. I wish you a frank and open discussion today and look forward to hear about your views and contribution on our common priorities.
Well, good evening, everyone, and let's thank the Commissioner for Mr. Oliver Varhelyi, the Commissioner for Enlargement and Neighbourhood of the European Commission, for this introductory remarks and for his salute. And I think he stressed two important points. One is that the pandemic changed the world we are talking about, and the other is that the Mediterranean is crucial to the future of the European Union, and that's what we will be talking about, especially Eastern Mediterranean, with our guests in this second panel of the session about rethinking security in the Mediterranean. And there will be, and I welcome them, Mr. Nikos Christodoulidis, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Cyprus, and Mr. Jan Kubiš, the Special Coordinator for Lebanon for the United Nations, and Mr. Nikolai Mladienov, who is the Special Coordinator for the Middle East peace process for the United Nations, and then there will be Mr. Matthew Palmer, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Bureau of the European and Eurasian Affairs for the U.S. Department of State. I'm Riccardo Sciatru. I'm a journalist for RAI, for Italian Public Television, and together with me there will be James McGann, Professor James McGann. Yes, I see him, and he's a lecturer and senior researcher in international studies, international affairs at the University of Pennsylvania, state we heard a lot about lately, and also a specialist in civil society and think tanks around the world. So the way civil society studies foreign policy and international politics, and it will be interesting to hear his questions to our guests. And I would like to start, of course, from Mr. Christodoulidis, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Cyprus. If he's, I can't see him right now, but I'm sure he is with us. Good evening, Minister. There he is. Minister, let's start from being a journalist. I would like to start from the news, because I understand that today the special envoy of the Secretary General of the United Nations for Cyprus, Miss Jane Hall-Lud, is in Cyprus, and she is supposed, as far as I understand, to meet Mr. Tatar, the leader of the Turkish-held Cyprus, the Republic of Turkish Cyprus, and then I think at 5 o'clock she will cross into Republic of Cyprus to meet President Anastasiadis. Just may I start by asking you, do you think that this visit may kickstart a new beginning of the dialogue that has stalled in the last years between the two parts of Cyprus and between the Turkey, Greece, and Britain that are involved in the peace process in Cyprus?
Dear Ricardo, first of all, let me thank you for the invitation to participate in such an esteemed forum. Yes, indeed, Ms. Lud, she's in Cyprus within the context of a new initiative from the UN Secretary General to examine the possibility for the resumption of talks from where they were interrupted in 2017 at Grand Montana. She already had a meeting with the Turkish Cypriot leader, Mr. Tatar, in the occupied areas of Cyprus, and in about two hours, she will have a meeting with President Anastasiadis. Then she will fly in Athens, and she has planned also to visit the other two guarantor powers, Greece and the UK. We really hope that this new initiative will bring concrete results, and this the only result that can be positive is a resumption of talks from, as I told you, from the point that they were interrupted the last time in Grand Montana, with the aim to reach a bizonal, bicommunal federation as the only possible option for the solution of Cyprus' problem. We are not optimistic, having in mind the statements from Mr. Tatar, but also from Turkey. Recently, they proceeded with more provocative actions in Cyprus' exclusive economic zone, but also in the fenced area of Famagusta, in clear violation of the UN Security Council resolution. But let me be clear from our side: the current status quo cannot be in any way the solution of the Cyprus problem. This is going to be against the interests of both Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots. It's going to be against our aim for the region, which is for peace and stability to be the situation in the Eastern Mediterranean. We are really looking forward to this new initiative. At the same time, discussing in an European forum, and we are very glad also to have with us Matthew Palmer, who's he knows very well the Cyprus problem, and we really expect the support of the United States, not only as a friend of Cyprus, but also as a permanent member of the Security Council of the UN, in order to help us to reach a settlement. I'm repeating myself, within the context of the UN Security Council resolution. In this effort, it is important to have also the support of the European Union. The Republic of Cyprus is a member of the European Union and will continue to be a member following the solution of the Cyprus problem. And we really believe that it can play a decisive role in order to reach the solution of the Cyprus problem.
Minister, just let me first stop you because I have to say that I'm sorry, but in introducing our guest, I forgot, and I say scusi to General Graziano, General Claudio Graziano, Chairman of the Military Committee of the European Union, as another guest. He's with us today, and we will hear from him also about the situation in Eastern Mediterranean. So again, sorry for forgetting him in introduction. Minister, you mentioned the support of the European Union. It is important for Cyprus. Chancellor Merkel just said, I think yesterday or the day before yesterday, the relationship with Turkey is going to be the main issue of the next meeting of the foreign ministers of the Union. What do you expect from the European Union? Now you're at the core of the center of a very complex situation in the Eastern Mediterranean, also concerning oil drilling and the dispute overseas, you know, the agreement on economic zones made by Turkey and Libya. So what do you expect on that from the European Union?
Very correctly mentioned in the last European Council, actually in October, the European leaders decided to offer to Turkey a positive agenda, a positive perspective for the future of EU-Turkey relations, provided that Turkey will terminate its illegal activities, either against Cyprus or against Greece, and its general anachronistic behavior in the Eastern Mediterranean, either in Libya, Syria. We see what's going on in Iraq, in Nagorno-Karabakh, etc. So the European Union expressed its readiness to work together with the further enhancement of EU-Turkey relationship, provided that Turkey will decide to change its policy. So the ball is in Turkey's court. The leaders, they will meet, the European Council will meet on December 10 and 11, will evaluate the situation from October 1st, and will decide on the first steps regarding the EU-Turkey relationship. I want to be clear there regard to that Cyprus as a close neighbor of Turkey. We want more than any other member state of the European Union, Turkey to be close to the European Union, and when it is feasible, to even join the European Union. But as you understand, it's up to Turkey if it really wants to join the European Union and follow the European way. I have to say that it is an issue of great concern, not only for Cyprus and Greece. We are discussing the issue of Turkey in all Foreign Affairs Council and almost all the European councils for the last 18 months. We are also looking forward to the new US administration, if it is possible to coordinate our approach towards Turkey. Of course, Turkey is a member of NATO. There are also issues there regarding Turkey's behavior, not only towards some other NATO members, but in general in the Eastern Mediterranean. So I want to be clear about the future of EU-Turkey relationship, that Cyprus is in favor, is probably the member state that is so supportive for the European path of Turkey, but everything will depend from the decisions of Turkey and Mr. Erdogan.
Anticipating my questions, Minister, because I wanted to ask you, do you think or do you hope that the new US administration, President Biden, will have a different approach? I read somewhere that some Greeks think that there can't be a best friend of Greeks and a Greek than Biden is supposed to be when he'll become president. Do you hope that there will be a change of approach from the US administration? Because you mentioned Mr. Palmer, we'll be hearing from him soon. He's been very clear about that in his statement, I think not later than last July. But sometimes President Trump has been seen as having a soft spot to President Erdogan sometimes. Do you think that this would change with the Biden administration? Do you hope that it will be better for you?
Sure that Matthew is in a better position to answer this question. What I will say, it's the perception of the countries in the region. The last, I will not say 5 years, even the last 8-9 years, the perception is that there is a disengagement of the United States from the region, or let's say a selective engagement. But I can tell you from our experience, especially during the last administration, the current administration, that we witnessed through very important development that the Eastern Mediterranean and the greater Middle East is an area of great interest for the United States. I have to say, and I have to thank also Matthew, because he's dealing with Cyprus, that during the last 3-4 years, especially in the case of the relationship between Cyprus and the United States, it was the first time that we have such a positive development. From our side, we welcome more US involvement in the Eastern Mediterranean and the greater Middle East, but at the same time, I have to say that the countries of the region, we should take responsibility of our region. Besides asking the United States to be, let's say, more present, at the same time, we have to take responsibility and work collectively in order to turn the Eastern Mediterranean, the greater Middle East, to an area of peace, stability, and cooperation. And I have to tell you that during the last years, we are working with other like-minded countries, Israel, Egypt, Lebanon, Palestine, UAE, through a web of regional cooperation mechanisms in order to tackle the challenges in the region, but also the great potential of the region. Because most of the times when we talk about Middle East and the Eastern Mediterranean, we're talking about the problems of the region. Of course, there are problems, but at the same time, there are a lot of promises, there are a lot of opportunities in this region. And I think the only way forward in order to take advantage of these opportunities is by working together. And recently, there are a number of developments in our region that clearly show that the potentials are there. If you allow me just to mention that on September 22, probably you are aware, the Statue of the Energy Forum established in Cairo with the participation of Egypt, Cyprus, Greece, Israel and Palestine, Jordan, also Italy was signed. There is also an interest from other countries to participate in this energy forum. At the same time, at the beginning of 2020, the interstate agreement on the East Med pipeline was signed between Cyprus, Greece, and Israel. Recently, the countries in the region, we decided to the establishment in Cyprus of a secretariat of this regional cooperation mechanism in order to better coordinate and better implement the decisions taken. Recently, again, seeing Matthew, he reminded me of an important agreement that Cyprus and the United States signed for the establishment in Cyprus of a regional training center for security of land, open seas, and ports. Very important development. I'm saying regional center. And last but not least, the agreement for normalization of relations between Israel, UAE, and Bahrain. So there are a lot of positive developments in this region, and all countries, we are committed to work even more in order to reach the potential of the region. This cooperation mechanism, and I want to make it clear, we are working on a positive, inclusive agenda. We are not coming together because there are problems with Turkey. We want Turkey to be part of this regional cooperation, but it's up to Turkey to respect international law, good neighborly relations, and respect the sovereignty and the sovereign rights of all countries in the region. We cannot accept Turkey to impose its own, we call it anachronistic vision, and this is not Cyprus reading. This is a reading from the majority of the countries in the region. But I want to make it clear, Ricardo, we cannot change geography. We want Turkey to be part of this regional cooperation, but it's up to Turkey if it really wants to join us.
It's very clear. And Mr. Before I hand over and give the line to Professor McGann, just let me ask one last question, because I think there's an interesting point. I read an editorial in the Daily Sabah newspaper, a very important Turkish newspaper, about Cyprus this morning. And it said some people from Turkish side of Cyprus are a victim of a sort of Stockholm syndrome. They say the idea was, okay, they are like, they think everything that's good for the Greek Cyprus is good for us, whereas they should be more, firm in their defense of their own interests. So it was accusing these people from the Turkish side of being victims of a Stockholm syndrome, or it said of like the syndrome of an enslaved eagle, an eagle that is a prisoner and doesn't fly. Whereas in the last elections, the Turkish side, the people from the Turkish side of Cyprus voted for a right-wing man who's a supporter of independence, supported a hardliner. So there is an internal conflict also in this story. Don't you think that in the end it's Cypriots, people from Cyprus, who have to get their act together and decide what they want to do? Because in the end, the peace process is among peoples, among people who have to talk to each other, and the two sides haven't been talking to each other. So do you think that there is a hope that they start talking?
Ricardo, it was up to Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots. I can assure you that it will be possible to reach a solution next week. The issue in Cyprus is not between Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots. Actually, the Turkish Cypriots are also victims of the Turkish occupation in Cyprus. And I don't know if you're aware, but recently the Turkish Cypriots they organized a demonstration against the visit of Mr. Erdogan in the occupied areas of Cyprus because they don't believe, they don't feel that they have anything common with the policies of Mr. Erdogan. Despite the problems, despite the difficulties, we really believe that there is no deadlock in diplomacy. That is why we welcome the new initiative of Mr. Guterres, and we believe that with the support of our friends, the European Union, and especially the permanent members of the Security Council, those countries that they have a real interest in Cyprus, it will be possible to reach a solution. What we want Cyprus to be able to decide, and Cypriots to decide. And when I say Cypriots, both Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots, to decide for their future in a reunited country, member state of the European Union.
Mr. Nikos Christodoulidis, Minister of Foreign Affairs for Cyprus, thank you very much. Over to Professor James McCann in the University of Pennsylvania. See you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for our colleagues around the world who are participating in the Med Dialogue. The context in which we place this discussion and the three individuals that I will be interviewing is in a world disrupted and transformed. It is almost at this stage difficult to even remember what normal was, and I would contend that there will be no new normal, only a series of disruptions that will challenge all of us, both policymakers and the public. I would like to place our discussion in the context of two countervailing scenarios, one positive, one negative. One is that each of the countries and the region itself will be faced, and I think in a pronounced way, with either twindemics, which are the economic and public health together facing countries, and then the worst case scenario, hydrodemic, where political, economic, public health, and social upheaval takes place. MENA region is no new experience in terms of disruptions and transformations, but we see sizable refugee populations, fragile states, ongoing and frozen and unresolved conflicts, geopolitical competition in a multipolar world, and the old adage, power abhors a vacuum, seems to resonate. And within that context, the second possible or two scenarios is one, that we will see increased twindemics and the intensity of twindemics and hydrodemics, or as was the case at the end of the Black Plague, a period of renaissance in terms of social, political, economic revival in the region. And I want to have each of the individuals I'll be interviewing place the specific questions within that context. Jan, who is the Special Coordinator for Lebanon, the United Nations, I'd like to ask you, Lebanon has been for some time quite volatile and fluid. The pandemic and or hydrodemic combined with the tragic blast in Beirut poured earlier in August have unsurprisingly plunged the country into chaos. The Lebanese fragile state risks representing an enormous element of instability in an already volatile region. What is needed to pursue stability and hopefully on the optimistic side, usher in a renaissance in Lebanon during this post-pandemic period? Jan.
Thank you very much, dear professor, dear colleagues. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. And thank you, Professor again, for framing the discussion in these two scenarios. I remember that last year when we gathered in Rome, at least for Lebanon, there were two scenarios as well competing. One scenario, it was a scenario of hope, of transformation, if you wish, and of a certain renaissance, if you wish, as well, although the term was not used. It was because of our meeting took place last year in the heydays of massive national protests against the systemic sectarian-based corruption and patronage, and against the political and financial elites that operate and perpetuate that system. This massive protest, sometimes counting hundreds of thousands of people all around the country across all the divides, sectarian, political, etc., they have hope and they send a signal of hope, of transformation. At the same time, already then, we registered with a certain degree of concerns, and they registered with a certain degree of concerns, that after the initial shock, the ruling elites simply tried to regroup and started to act in the usual way and took all the steps and measures gradually in an effort to protect and preserve the system and their place in the system and their profit from the system. And 1 year on, I have to say that there are no two trends. At this point of time, there is only one trend. It's the business of usual. There's no transformation. It's no disruption with the past. It's more the business as usual. And the country, in the meantime, entered a phase of total economic, financial, and social meltdown and collapse of its unsustainable economic model, compounded by political and governance paralysis that lasts over 1 year. And all that is not necessarily, as you put it, chaos and certain disruptions maybe as a result of this crisis. No, it's a result of a very systematic effort to preserve this very corrupt and failed model, if you wish, economic, social model without any social contract between the ruling authorities and the people. And the blast, and again, it was mentioned here, was perhaps the last element that resulted, eliminated the last vestiges of hope. And what remains is despair, at least at this point of time, disappointment, disillusionment. And at the same time, the elites are doing the same thing as they did. A year ago, Prime Minister then Hariri resigned in the wake of the massive protests. Another government came. That government lacked political support, so was unable to deliver. Then that government of Prime Minister Diab resigned after the blast in Beirut port. And approximately 5 weeks ago, again, Prime Minister designate Saad Hariri received and accepted a mandate to put together a government, but more than 1 month on, in this very deep crisis that is destabilizing and can eventually lead, if not addressed in midterm period, 6 months period, into a protracted and deep humanitarian crisis engulfing the whole Lebanon, nothing much is happening. Still, political forces are negotiating based on their interests, their vision for the future of the country, and it's leading nowhere. The caretaker government that is in place of Mr. Diab is not very much active because of limitations given by the constitution, but simply giving space to others, and people are suffering more and more. So yes, it's deeper than just a compounded crisis. It's systemic, and at this point of time, I don't see any chances of a real change, transformation, or renaissance. It can come only with a new government formed very soon that would adopt a real reform program, and the time is of the essence. And for the time, there are no good signals, no good omens. Over to you.
So if I might follow on with the question, in comparative sense, Belgium went for some time without a central government. Is it likely that Lebanon will continue business as usual without a government? And how long can it do that without risking further crisis?
I don't think that that's an option. Of course, it's an option because it's happening, that there's no government for quite a while. As I said, effectively, the country is not governed, not managed for over 1 year because the previous government of Prime Minister Diab was not able to deliver much. And the crisis is deepening and escalates. And in the situation of COVID, where indeed deaths is growing also exponentially, in a situation, as it was mentioned already, of over 1 million of Syrian refugees, of Palestinian refugees in the country that are in dire needs as well, and deepening needs. And now Lebanese, over 50% of the population is already living in poverty and in food insecurity. And the situation is worsening day by day. So yes, the situation can continue with grave consequences, not only social and social strife, but everything. It could bring more extremism. And as you know, in this region, simply extremism is always present. There were signals in the past months of extremism of different kind in the country. And yes, still, this is not enough. It doesn't serve as a wake-up call to the political and financial leaders of the country to start managing, controlling somehow the situation. And the first step is indeed to create a government as soon as possible.
Jan Kubis, thank you very much for your insights on the future of Lebanon and the various dimensions that must be considered. We'll now move on to Nikolai Mladenov, Special Coordinator for Middle East Peace Process for the United Nations. Nicholas, the region has been marked by the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Libya, Syria, Iran, and Yemen, all of which negatively affecting the search for stability in the Middle East and North Africa region. How is the UN working to manage and, more importantly, resolve these crucial crises within the region especially in a world that is both disrupted and transformed. Nikolai?
Thank you. And let me tag along to something that Jan was talking about and through his presentation. And I think that is the very deep sense of angst that we all have in the region about certain developments that have been happening for quite some time. And you mentioned them in detail: Libya, Syria, obviously the Palestinian question, Iraq, and elsewhere. From the perspective of here in Jerusalem, I think the UN has not changed where it stands on key issues. And that is that the two-state solution remains the only feasible way to get out of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. However, what we see on the ground, as elsewhere in the region, is a slipping reality, a reality that empowers slowly but surely more radicals. It creates more problems because of the joint and the economic effects of the crisis. And if you remove the sense of hope in the future, and you remove the sense of leadership on all sides, you do have an explosive environment. Now, that environment here in Israel and Palestine has not exploded, but since the time that I've been in this position, I see how slowly but surely the prospect of resolving the conflict on the basis of two states is slipping, how young people on both sides are becoming increasingly more radical because contacts between the peoples is lessening and reducing. The image of the other side, the enemy, becomes ever more complicated and difficult, and the overall environment remains quite prone to radicalization and extremism. Now, the only way to address that is to show real political leadership on all sides. What we've been trying to do over the last few years, in the absence of an Israeli-Palestinian peace process, is to try and prevent the situation from further deteriorating by preventing war in Gaza and working on the keeping the contacts between the Palestinians and the Israelis alive. Now, I think that is an important part of our work. Of course, it falls short of the bigger goals of peace in the region, but it is important in the sense that it has prevented another conflict from becoming an active hot zone on the already complicated map of the region. Now, at the same time, we also see dynamics going in a different direction, and that was pointed out by previous speakers. We have unprecedented levels of cooperation emerging in the Eastern Mediterranean, as well as the normalization of relations between Israel, the UAE, and Bahrain, as well as opening of maritime talks between Israel and Lebanon. I think these are also very positive elements in the sense that they do create some direction for the future. Now, how we tackle the difficulties that are being created on the ground by the politics of anger and the politics of lack of progress, and attached to them the perspective that is being created by cooperation and coordination in the region, isn't a question that we need to answer pretty much in 2021. Certainly that answer didn't come in 2020. And I'm really hoping that as we move into the next year, we will see a renewed interest in diplomacy, a renewed interest in dialogue and meaningful discussions and meaningful negotiations on the Israeli-Palestinian front in order to increase the sense of hope for the future rather than the sense of misery that particularly some young people are feeling.
So, Nikolai, clearly in terms of the policy changes that Trump has initiated, one might say disrupted and transformed the traditional approach to achieving peace and stability in the MENA region, and with the normalization of relations between Israel, UAE, Bahrain, and now possibly Saudi Arabia. How does that affect, you've said that the UN will continue its policies, but doesn't that transform and disrupt even the UN's approach to peace and stability in the region? And can you talk about that and the what is, how that affects the strategy as the number of countries normalize relations with Israel, and what that means for the region and for peace and stability?
Well, these developments have certainly disrupted the Palestinian position and the Palestinian leadership's traditional stand on how to tackle the resolution to the conflict. I don't think they've really changed the basic premise that the only way out that is sustainable and meaningful for all is the separation between Israelis and Palestinians and an agreement on security, economy, and a two-state solution. Now, how that is achieved is a matter of how you approach the prospect of negotiations and what is the leadership on both sides. In fact, I believe that if you take a deep and profound look at what has been happening recently and normalization agreements that you mentioned, they should be very helpful to the prospect of reviving these discussions and these negotiations between Israelis and the Palestinians. So obviously, this is not a short-term perspective. There's still a lot of emotion and anger on the ground. But if you look further into the future, you will see that those countries that have been most effective in advocating for Israeli-Palestinian peace or for negotiations or for changing certain policies are the countries that have bilateral relations with both sides. Egypt and Jordan are countries in the region as particular pertinent examples. And I think if you add two more countries to that list and others in the future, you will see the prospect of a stronger Arab engagement, both with Israelis and Palestinians, ushering a new era of discussions on the future of how to revive meaningful negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians. I would argue that the starting point for those discussions must be the economy. We're currently facing a mammoth economic crisis in the region, spurred by the COVID-19 pandemic. The Palestinian people are feeling it in a particularly difficult manner because of their specific conditions in the West Bank and Gaza. And if we do see a restart of Israeli-Palestinian discussions on the economic relationship that modernize their economic relationships, and that those discussions are supported by the international community, the Americans, the Europeans, the Russians, the Arabs, I think we can actually find a new framework through which to move forward. Obviously, that is going to be hard and difficult, and it will demand a change in the traditional stances of both sides. But it is something that is quite necessary in this environment.
Nikolai, thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. We now turn to Matthew Palmer, Deputy Assistant Secretary the Bureau of European and Eurasian Affairs, the U.S. State Department. Secretary Palmer, obviously, in terms of and follow on to the last set of questions, I posed two possible scenarios. One that twindemics and hydrodemics will essentially be potentially present in certain regions, and certainly the MENA region has historically presented unique challenges for policymakers. The second is a renaissance that would be ushered in at the end of, much like the Middle Ages, ushering in Italy, the Renaissance, and emanating from Italy. So it's, I asked you the question, the policies that have been initiated by Donald Trump are unconventional in the sense of traditional approaches to the peace process in the Middle East and the normalization of relationships. What do you see as the promise and peril of that set of new approaches to peace and stability in the MENA region?
Thanks very much for that question, Professor, and thanks for the opportunity to participate in this important event today. It's an honor and a privilege to be among such distinguished panelists. I don't want to get too deep into the issue of the Middle East peace. I'm the Europe guy rather than the Middle East guy. But what I would do, I think, is highlight the way in which the United States is looking at the Eastern Mediterranean as a coherent strategic space, an area in which we find ourselves competing for positive influence against other great powers, including those that we look at as having malign intent: Russia, the People's Republic of China, Iran. And I think we've been broadly successful in this over the last 4 years. I look at the relationship between the United States and Greece, the relationship between the United States and Cyprus as being at high points. I think the relationships are as good as they have ever been. We have, with Greece, modernized and updated the Mutual Defense Cooperation Agreement. We're home porting a sizable ship, the Herschel Woody Williams, out of Suda Bay, doing more out of Larissa, Stefano Venicchio. We've been working on the port of Alexandropoli to help strengthen Greece's connections, energy connections through the Balkans. With Cyprus, Foreign Minister Christodoulidis has talked through some of the real high points of this, including IMET, professional military education for the first time with Cyprus, changes to the ITAR regulations that will enable us to have deeper and stronger security cooperations. I think one of the real challenges that we have is Turkey and Turkish behavior in the Eastern Med. Turkey is a very important partner for the United States. It is a NATO ally. Turkish behavior, however, has been a driver of instability across the region. I think just some of the highlights are worth putting on the table here for discussion, including what happened most recently in Nagorno-Karabakh and the Caucasus, but also Turkish involvement in Libya, drilling operations off Cyprus, provocative exploratory activities in the Aegean, the acquisition and testing of the S-400 system, which is at odds with Turkey's obligations to the NATO alliance. And also I would put on that list the shrinking of democratic space in Turkey. NATO is an alliance not just of interests, but of values. So navigating this problem set with Turkey is going to be an important part of ensuring stability across the Eastern Mediterranean, a strong relationship between Turkey and the United States, a strong partnership between Turkey and the European Union, and Turkey fulfilling its potential as a member of the NATO alliance. So these are issues that we're working with. I like the way that you framed it in terms of the possibilities, the good scenario, the bad scenario. It's not really my job to predict the future so much as it is to try and shape the future. And so our goal is to work with the countries of the region across the Eastern Mediterranean space to ensure that we have the best possible chance of securing the positive outcome that you identified, a new renaissance, an intellectual renaissance, a political renaissance, one that contributes to regional peace and security, which would be an important part of global peace and security. Thank you.
Yes, Secretary, the question I have, which has been raised several times in the program today and yesterday, and in previous programs, is the sense that the U.S. is disengaging. And while your portfolio is Europe, it does touch on the Mediterranean. You have talked about Turkey. You have made some references to what the future may hold in terms of U.S. policy and commitment. Can you be more specific about what are, beyond Turkey and the countries of crisis in the Middle East, which touch on Europe and certainly throughout the Mediterranean?
Sure. I think I hear the criticism. I hear it all the time. The U.S. is disengaged. U.S. is not as present. I hear it in the Eastern Med. I hear it in the Balkans. I think, frankly, it's untrue and unfair. I look at just the fact of presence, right, which is the ultimate, the coin of the realm when it comes to engagement. What Secretary Pompeo has done in terms of being present in the region, the significant chain of high-level visitors that we've had to Cyprus recently, the opening of the training center on Cyprus that Foreign Minister Christodoulidis referred to, the establishment of this new mechanism for multilateral engagement, the 3+1, which is a vehicle for the United States to coordinate and cooperate with Greece and Cyprus and Israel, in particular on energy and security issues. And we're very high on that forum, and it presents, I think, tremendous opportunities for us to grow and strengthen not just the bilateral relationships, but these multilateral partnerships that can be a part of managing, an important part of managing collective challenges. Energy, I think, is an area where the United States has really stepped up its engagement. I look at what we've been doing in ensuring that LNG is a part of the energy mix across the Eastern Mediterranean, that we're working to give the countries of the region an alternative to Russian gas and Russian supplies that create leverage for the Kremlin, that result in political influence for Moscow that is used to malign purposes. Alexandroupolis is a big part of that picture. So is the ability to get LNG in directly into Turkey. And if you look at the numbers in terms of where Turkey is getting its gas from, LNG has really fundamentally changed the energy picture. We're strongly supporting the development of the gas resources in the Eastern Med and want to work to help ensure that that gas is able to get to markets. But the United States is committed to the Eastern Med. We are in this for the long haul, and these partnerships are very important to us, ones that we're working to further deepen and develop across the regional space.
Assistant Secretary, thank you very much, and thanks to all of the panelists. This provides a dynamic dimension to the program and an interactive opportunity to engage policymakers across the region, and I want to thank you. I now turn it back to our host in Italy, ISPI, and specifically Riccardo.
Thank you, Professor McGann. And just to call in and introduce General Claudio Graziano, head of the Military Committee of the European Union. Good evening, General. There you are. Thanks for being with us this afternoon. And I would like to start from asking you, the European Union is developing a new defense and strategic framework called the Strategic Compass, which is the name that we all ask ourselves, what does it mean? What is it going to be? What consequences is it going to be on, and specifically on the Mediterranean region, on the approach of European countries to security and defense issues in the Mediterranean region, and with what consequences?
Yeah, thank you so much, and good evening. Of course, I'm going to give the opinion of the military side of the room. I would say the strategic compass, if you want, is the logical development of the global strategy that already in 2016, in a way, asked Europe to an increased level of ambition, becoming a worldwide security provider, starting from the neighbor. So in this sense, the European Union has found, coming to the Mediterranean area, an autonomous space to act in the crisis management, addressing the root cause of the different crises. And in this, we have to consider that the European Union is the only worldwide international organization that can generate what is called integrated approach, because does have at its disposal all the elements of the power. We are speaking about the diplomatic power, the economic power, the information power, but also the military power. Yes, we are also speaking about the military power, because as I said, sometimes no crisis can solve only with military instrument. But I would say no crisis can be solved without military instruments. That means that we are speaking about a combination of soft and hard power. And in this sense, Europe has to learn how to, let's say, how to use the language of powers. Also, thanks to a series of initiatives that are trying to establish what we call a strategic autonomy that is very connected with the strategic compass. Strategic autonomy that is not autonomy from someone, but autonomy to do something alone if necessary, better in partnership if it is possible. And of course, that also, if Europe wants to be a credible and assertive mediator, it's important to have military instrument as a deterrence. Now, with the strategic compass, we expect, we would say, more political guidance, defining to what extent and in which particular term European Union wants to act as a global security provider, addressing 4 areas that are crisis management, resilience, capabilities, and in terms of capabilities, strategic compass would, we hope, is going to define what we call a full spectrum capability package to operate in crisis management and partnership. And if you look to the region, to the Mediterranean region, you will see that in practical terms, there is a direct link between this element of the strategic compass and the problem that we are facing in Mediterranean, considering that the Mediterranean Sea, the Mediterranean region, is the terminal of all the regional crises with direct spillover to Europe. So in the Mediterranean, European Union, in terms of security defense, has to manage crisis across addressing the root of the problems, either in autonomy or with partner, of course. And secondly, we have to work on resilience, also in pandemic, because the pandemic is worsening the scenario, making worse the situation we had at the beginning of the year, that already was we had a lot of crisis already, and after that we had a lot of degradation with new crisis and new element of risk. And also to do that, we need capabilities that has to be addressed with a strategic compass, and also the problem of the partnership to understand when it's possible to operate in operation and cooperation with partners. That, of course, is also the preferable route. But if the partners are not available or is focused in other areas, in this case, European Union has to act autonomously, as it happened in Central Mediterranean with Operation Sereni, or in other areas like Sahel, that at the end of the day is very much connected to the Mediterranean Sea.
Talking about this, you've just taken part a few days ago in a I think it was called the Shade Med conference, in a conference to evaluate cooperation, military cooperation in the Mediterranean, where you made a point about mission Sereni that's been launched a few months ago to control central Mediterranean and the waters of Libya and the Libyan coast. What's your evaluation of that mission? Has it worked? Has it been useful?
You know, I think the short answer is yes. Sereni so far has worked and has achieved positive results within means and capability. And I think that the answer from the European Union was timely if you consider the point of the crisis already in December 19, the Berlin conference that called to enforce the arms embargo. At this point, the European Union was able to launch in a few months an embargo that is not only embargo, an operation that is Sereni, the Repress Sophia, that to me was already a very successful operation. And this mission Sereni is extremely important for the stability in the Mediterranean. It's of course the only one that is implementing the United Nations Security Resolution on the arms embargo, but is also very important because we have to consider that Libya is also represents also the bottlenecks of many security concerns coming from Sahel, with Europe as already other capacity building mission. So in a way, in operational terms, you can even imagine an unicum of commitment. And coming back to Sereni, of course, it's implementing this arms embargo that is imposed by United Nations. Is the only European Union is the only organization that is doing so. And we have also to say that Sereni is also running other tasks. We are speaking about preventing smuggling of oil, the disruption of the net of migrants, the capacity building and training from the Libyan Coast Guard. And all the tasks represent the credibility of Sereni. And of course, it's extremely important that what is important that remain, we are going to have a continuity in the commitment of the member state to fulfill and to make available assets, naval assets, air assets to run this operation, because Sereni need to be effective, need to be perceived as impartial, and that is only possible with adequate means and capability. I think that really Sereni in this moment is the most important CSDP European missions and operations, and we have to really to support this mission because it's the flag of European Union in a crisis that is affecting a lot of the security, in which European Union for many regions was not probably present that it was necessary in the past, but now with the ceasefire, with the operation, there is a new window of opportunity. Of course, we probably need to better communicate and to encourage member states to increase this contribution for the sake of the operation credibility. And as the High Representative said, is also now time for other members of the United Nations to share the share of responsibility and stop feeling a conflict that has already caused a much of pain and losses. Having said that, I reiterate, it's extremely important for us to support Sereni and to support also the other operation mission that in a way or the other are run in or around Mediterranean Sea or in Africa, but in any case in areas that are affecting the Mediterranean Sea and the Mediterranean region.
Thank you. Let me just briefly, to close, let me just go back to where we started from today. So the issue of Eastern Mediterranean, Cyprus and Turkey. In these days, there's talking about naval operations. There are naval drills going on in the Eastern Mediterranean around Cyprus with the participation of forces from Britain, France, Greece, Republic of Cyprus, of course, Egypt and the Arab Emirates in front of Turkey. The highlight of the drills are British Royal Marines and Cyprus Special Forces are going to descend from a helicopter on a ship that's allegedly hijacked by terrorists. Of course, there's also a hint about possible actions towards Turkish vessels. You know, that is the big issue in that part of the Mediterranean right now, or at least that is how it's being seen by the Turkish press. That's what they say. I just would like to ask you, how do you see 3 European countries, European Union countries, Greece, France, and Cyprus, one former Britain, and 2 countries in front doing naval drills in front of a NATO ally shore? Turkey is our NATO ally, together with 2 countries, Egypt and the Arab Emirates, that are part of an ongoing, let's say, cold conflict, sometimes cold, sometimes not that cold, that goes throughout the Middle East. You know, Turkey and Qatar on one side, we know, and the Emirates and Egypt and Saudi Arabia on the other, and there is a big tension between the 2 groups. So how do you see, we've been talking about a framework for European defense, but then you have countries going on their way with other countries out of Europe, you know. So don't you think that is a complex situation there that might get dangerous in a long period?
I mean, the situation is is complex. We said before that in general term, Mediterranean is the terminal of all the crisis, and probably has been for all the centuries, the past century is going to be in the future. And in a way, the East Med is the most crucial and critical area, one of the most critical areas in the world. If you consider, now we're speaking about Turkey, Cyprus, Greece and another maritime exercise, but East Med is also the area in which there are Syria, Lebanon, the penetration of Russia, deployments, effect of Nagorno-Karabakh, etc. So all in all, East Med is really a very delicate area that, of course, is a high concern. We said before, we are always trying to find, and we should always find a common, unique European voice in all the crises. In this particular case, we are speaking about an exercise that I think took place also in the past years that involve a few European countries, plus, let's say, other countries that are maybe partner in this particular case. Of course, in this area, this naval exercise has been perceived of someone with like a provocation, like it was for deployment from Turkey. And that is an area, of course, there are historical reasons. There is a competition for energy resources. it's an area of, I repeat, of high sensibility, where it's important that the European Union found a common voice to address the general problems. But an exercise probably has to put in the right side, considering what it is. So an exercise. And maybe in this kind of exercise, other countries could have taken place. There is also in the maritime exercise activity at sea that happen between two countries, etc. So we have also to put things in the right level. And of course, European Union, when it comes to the solidarity, standing full solidarity with Greece and Cyprus and the rule of law. At the time, we need to maintain the full channel of dialogue with all the stakeholders in order to keep a stable and secure Mediterranean in ISMED and a cooperative relation among partners. And that should be at the strategic interest. Of course, again, at the political level, it's important that this kind of crises are addressed with a single voice. After that, there are areas in which we can operate in strategic autonomy, also with the military asset. Others are different, and not always is easy to find agreement within the country to a common answer. Maybe you can have also operations that are led by some nation without involving directly European Union, but indirectly. It happened in other occasions. The important thing that Europe is more influential. It's respected as an organization, international organization, and keep all the channel open. We said there are all instruments of power, particularly in this med. Probably they are the channel of diplomacy, the economic, and different definition of hard power. But for sure, Europe need to be more powerful, because if it is more powerful and more credible, can probably participate also better on the table of negotiation, on the table of mediation, and more influential, because if we are stronger, probably is also if we are stronger, probably is also easier to spread around the peace and security.
Stronger to have more peace. Thank you, General. General Graziano, head of the European Union Military Committee. And I would like to close our discussion here by thanking all the panelists that took part in the discussion of this second session dedicated to stabilizing the area of the Mediterranean. And well, thank you. Have a good evening. And we're looking forward to hearing other opinions in the coming hours and days of this Med Forum. Thank you.